You are listening to ProveText, a GlossaHouse podcast exploring Scripture and all things related to it. New episodes are released daily. For more information, check out GlossaHouse.com and subscribe to our channels on Spotify and YouTube. Welcome and enjoy.
Hello, welcome to ProveText and GlossaHouse TV. I am Michael Halcomb, and today I have the great privilege of talking with Mitch Hudson. And
hello.
Yeah, if you don't know either of those names, check out. You can Google my name. You can Google his name. But Mitch is working on this incredible new project called The Promised Land. And
That's right.
If you're watching, I'm going to show that up on the screen. So, Mitch, as we get going here, tell us a little bit about yourself, man. Where are you from? Where did you grow up?
Yeah. Well, I live in Atlanta, Georgia now. I was born and raised in Virginia. And then when I was a teenager, I lived overseas in the small island country called Bahrain. That's like right next to Saudi Arabia. Grew up in the Middle East, came, as a teenager at least, and came back to America for college. I went to Liberty University, which is in Virginia. So I went to film school. And then after I graduated, I've been working in film ever since, both writing and directing, and then also working as an assistant director on other projects. I'm actually, believe it or not, I'm actually working right now. I'm actually on set as we're speaking. I'm just in one of the trailers here on the set of The Chosen, where I work as an assistant director.
Wow. Wow, excellent.
Yeah.
So you're working on The Chosen at the same time as you're working on The Promised Land.
That's correct. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Are they filmed in the same locations generally or different areas?
No, so the Chosen films it's kind of partially filmed in Texas and partially filmed in Utah. And we filmed the pilot episode of The Promised Land in Carlsbad, New Mexico. And we are looking to shoot the rest of the first season in St. George, Utah. So it should hopefully have Utah in common once it's all said and done.
All right. And Utah, because am I understanding this right? That some Mormon collective have built like a mini sort of like ancient city or Jerusalem or something like that.
So yes, yeah, the LDS Church built this big Jerusalem set that The Chosen films on for their seasons. For us, with our show, it's set in the desert, so it looks a little bit more kind of like where I grew up, right? So we needed a little bit more of kind of that red rock sandy sort of look than what they need for The Chosen. And believe it or not, like St. George is perfect for that. Like it's actually just the most. I mean, there are parts when you're in St. George where if you shut your eyes and reopen them, you're like, am I in Jordan right now? Am I in Wadi Rum? Am I in the Sinai Peninsula? Is that where I'm at right now? And it feels like that when you're there.
Amazing. So, man, what inspired you to create The Promised Land?
Yeah, well, so the concept didn't come from me. I was actually kind of approached by a film school friend of mine, a graduate from the same film program that I went to. He came to me, and our associate producer had this idea of, hey, Moses, but told with the cameras of The Office. Yes. What can you do with that? Jeremy came up to me and was like, do you think you could write and direct a pilot based off of this as just a general starting point, right? Like, all right, look at the Bible. Do you think there are stories with Moses that you could tell in the style of The Office and Parks and Rec, where you have interviews with the characters, you have kind of that handheld documentary feeling throughout? And I was like, that is a very interesting idea. I thought it was a great idea, pretty much right away. And I had to look into kind of the scriptures to figure out, like, well, where do we start with this? How does this work? And also, what is the tone? You got to be careful with something like this, because I wanted to make sure that if we're going to do it, when you do something funny with the Bible, it's kind of easy to trigger people's sort of blasphemy radar.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, well, you got to make sure that if it's going to be funny, it needs to be funny because of how much we can relate to the characters, not because, the joke is not on the Bible. The joke is, these are people, and these are people that God used, but they're people, and people make mistakes and people get into funny situations. And so, I kind of took that approach and found or rediscovered the story of Moses and Jethro when Jethro comes and gives Moses leadership advice in Exodus 18. And I read that and I was like, man, okay, say what you want, right? Moses, Jethro, desert, all that stuff. At the end of the day, this is a story about a father-in-law coming in and telling you, you got to change what you're doing. I think that is like a universal thing. It's not, that's not even just unique to this particular story. You have someone that you look up to, a mentor, a stronger force in your life who's coming in and saying, you're not doing this right. And I was like, okay, that's funny. That's relatable. Let's start there. And that's how I kind of started off with writing the pilot. And that would have been about 3 years ago.
3 years ago. Wow.
Yeah.
The opening scene too is just brilliant. Where they're battling the Amalekites and Moses.
That's right.
He can't keep his arms.
He can't keep his arms up. Yeah, I know. It's one of my favorite Bible stories. I was like, we got to have that. Like that's just so. The visual of just two guys holding up Moses' arms and he's just trying his best.
So I think that is interesting. So I've been venturing into stand-up comedy and I'm moving in that world. Nice. And, been performing and things like that. And I haven't gone specifically down like the Bible route, right. But I do think, even clean humor is just difficult in some ways, right? Like
for sure. Yeah.
It's more challenging. But in a way, there's a bigger payoff. I feel like,
right.
So
there's not as many references for clean humor. What I mean? That's part of what makes it difficult. Is that absolutely. It's easy to operate in a space that there's already a lot of content in. Yeah. But it's a much smaller pool in clean comedy.
Being in like I've been in comedy clubs to perform, and being the clean comedian, you're kind of like the odd guy out, right?
Right. Totally.
And I've noticed. More often than not, people getting up there on stage don't understand the structure of a joke, for one. Right? Most of the stuff they say is just a premise that could be kind of funny, but there isn't really like a punch or a payoff at the end. Right. The other thing I've noticed is that people just tend to get up there with like shocking premises. Like they'll try to say something shocking, right?
Right.
And get a laugh.
A lot of people laugh because they are like, ooh, I can't believe they said that.
Yes.
But that's not necessarily the same as laughing because something was funny.
Right.
It's a little different for sure.
Yeah. So, like watching your show, it's absolutely hilarious. Even just looking today, I was going back through and looking on your Instagram, and people we quickly picked up on this is The Office meets The Chosen kind of thing.
Right.
Like
exactly.
Everyone's picking up on that. So I am curious about how you're ensuring that the comedic elements like complement the narrative without really overshadowing it. Even like, Moses' kids, he can't like find them. Like that.
Right.
That's hilarious.
Right.
Like, so how are you ensuring that the comedic elements are complementing the narrative without overshadowing?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think for me, it's what's nice about this show and what's nice about the source material that we have is that the stories are kind of already there, right? At least the A plots, Moses's plots are already kind of present in the Bible. So when I'm coming up with what the episodes are about, there's already a lot to work with in terms of, okay, what is happening, right? What is the context? And so then for me, it kind of alleviates one big element of writing, which is like, well, what do they do? Right? What happens? A lot of that is kind of already taken care of just because there's so much to work with what's in the Bible. And so for me, I do spend the majority of the time with writing, working on the kind of the comedic premises of the scenes, right? Like, and so I think the way that I try not to overshadow it is that I try to remember that at the end of the day, I want each of the episodes to kind of have a moment of kind of heart and genuine and, hey, let's remember what this is all about. You know what I mean? And so it's kind of like, okay, well, if I know that there's going to be a moment, where maybe for just a few minutes, the jokes kind of stop and we settle into, hey, what's the important thing here? That either is happening with the characters or, whatever's happening in that scene. Then everything else is kind of fun. Then everything else is either a setup for that or a fun time. And so then when it comes to how am I writing, with the kind of comedic storylines or the plot lines, I mean, honestly, the truth is it's more about trying to figure out what do I stay focused on because there's a lot of opportunity.
Right.
But I think for me, I try to make sure like, okay, you still want to be able to follow it. You don't want it to fall into punchline city where it's just like, comment. Hey, you see that over there? I ought to tell you, you know what I mean? Like you don't want to kind of fall into that with this because you still have to tell a story. But for me, it's like when I'm looking at the page after I've written it, when I'm looking at the scenes, I go back and I'm like, all right, here's a page of the script. Did I laugh a couple times on it? And if not, I need to go back and look at this dialogue because maybe there's something here that I'm missing. Because I do think that a lot of times with comedy writing, especially with shows, and again, I'm still growing in this, right? I'm not an expert. I haven't been writing for networks for decades or anything like that. Like I'm still figuring this out kind of as we go. But at least from my perspective, it seems like a lot of times the best jokes are just did you nestle into it a little bit? You know, if you're saying that this is the premise, did you steer into it? You know, if you're going to have this character who's an Egyptian who's hiding out and the guy's trying to find him, all right, well, did I ask all the right questions from the guy who's trying to find him? You know, like even something as simple as like, well, what's your name? Okay, well, this Egyptian doesn't know a lot of Hebrew names, but he knows the one famous Hebrew, so you can say, oh, it's Moses. You know, and so then it's like, okay, wait, your name's Moses? And then that's kind of where you can kind of find some of the fun of it is just kind of nestling into sort of these situations that have already been created just from the characters and the setting. Right. I don't know if that's a helpful answer, but
yeah. I think that's great. And there's obviously a lot to work with in Exodus. I mean, you have tons of backstory that you can pull even from like Genesis if you need to.
Totally.
Yes, there's a lot to work with there.
Yeah, and it's fun because you know you can kind of find it by reading it too. Like if you have the mentality, like you just kind of read it and you just kind of ask questions. You know, I think one story that is really fun to me is a brief thing, but there's a story later on in Exodus where once they've gotten to Mount Sinai, Moses goes up and down the mountain. You know, he's got a lot of meetings with God. He comes back down, and there's a moment where he's after they've consecrated themselves, after they've gotten some of the laws, he sets up an altar at the base of the mountain. They do a sacrifice, and he's kind of he puts the blood on top of like some of the jars that are around this altar, and then it says that as he's going, he also throws it onto the people. And I was like, now that's interesting. Like, I understand what this is and the importance of it and what they're talking about, but I'm also like, what did that person think?
Right.
But, you know, who is it? Like, you're kind of, if you're in the front row, you're like in the splash zone, you know, for like getting the, you know, the consecration on you. Like, so that, you know, there's a lot of stuff like that where it's like, if you read it and you just kind of ask, like, well, what would it be like to be that person in that scenario?
Right.
There's a lot there to work with for sure.
And just walking up and down a mountain several times. Like,
yeah. Just a mountain. It's just a mountain. Yeah. Just up and down. Carrying some tablets, you know?
Yeah, that's funny. So, you know, I was reading this. I started reading this book, but I think it's Scott Sedita, The 8 Characters of Comedy. I don't know if you're familiar with that book.
No,
it's
sounds
pretty
cool.
interesting.
Yeah.
You know, and if you look at those characters that he's mentioning, you have sort of really The Office, like all those characters on there, like, you know, fit into that. The lovable idiot, for example.
Right.
Or the dumb person who thinks they're smart.
Right.
You know, Michael Scott on The Office, the lovable idiot, Kevin, or like the narcissistic person like Dwight, right? So you have like all these, it's pretty interesting. And I noticed too in watching The Promised Land, how what was funny to me was the way that some of the characters do align with The Office. So, you know, Moses as a sort of Michael Scott, or Joshua as the assistant to, you know, which is a running,
assistant to Moses. Yeah, right. Yeah, for sure.
The Office, you know. So I'm curious about, you know, your character development. You mentioned that you have a lot of, well, maybe not a lot, but a number of secondary and tertiary characters in the book of
Right.
Exodus. You do have those primary
Right.
characters, but how do you go about one, character development, and then two, like casting for that?
Right. Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, so for character development, I wanted to make sure that each of the characters felt distinct, because it can be hard to surmise personality from the Bible. Like, we don't necessarily get a lot of like, what were they like? We kind of just know mostly what they did, and you can reverse engineer some of that. Like when you look at the Bible, we know that Moses, at least from my perspective, was someone who kind of wore his heart on his sleeve. Like, and definitely, if he had an emotion, he followed through with that emotion. Like he gets angry at one of the Egyptians who was mistreating a Hebrew, and he kills him, which is a big mistake, and he learns from it. But he has this streak of like, all right, if he's feeling something, he's all in on what that is, and that was a big part for me. Was I think he's a very kind of heart on the sleeve type of a character. And it's a little bit easier with Moses because you have so much information about him. And so for a lot of the other characters, I think I kind of just looked at it as like, well, what, and especially with comedy writing too, you really want your characters to be very different from each other. Like, it doesn't really help you if a lot of the characters are similar, because then there's no, like if you had Abbott and Costello, but they were both Costello,
Right.
It doesn't work. Right. You have to have differences. And so I would kind of look at like, all right, well, I really like this idea of an Egyptian character coming in. And I think an Egyptian character, it seems to me this would be a funny idea if he was trying to blend in by just being the nicest guy, the last guy you would expect, like just, he's just out. He's just, proud, and he's just, hey, great to meet you. Oh my gosh, how are you? Like he's the person who wins over everybody. You know what I mean? But then you have this person who's looking for him, Coro, who is in the Bible later on in Numbers, who eventually leads an uprising against Moses. So I know that's coming, but I'm also thinking, well, why would he lead an uprising against Moses? Well, in the Bible, it says that that basically he'd had a group kind of go against him, and they were trying to make their own sacrifices to God. So it's not like he didn't believe in God. It's not anything to do with that. It seems like it's probably just a difference of leadership. And so I thought, well, if Moses is kind of on his sleeve with his feelings, and he's a little bit more maybe impulse driven while still trying to follow after what God wants, then it seems like Coro would be like a by the books kind of stickler type person, and maybe a little bit grumpier. And then, which works great with, well, then he should be the guy trying to figure out this Egyptian character, because you put the grumpiest possible character with the nicest, most, golden retriever like character, and then it's just naturally fun. And so that's kind of the way that I would approach a lot of the character writing, was just like, all right, well, what do we not have yet in terms of a flavor and a personality type? And I would try to put that in there. I also looked at like Enneagram types. I wanted to have a lot of them represented across the board there too, and just to make them different,
Right.
And then, let's see, you had also asked about when it comes to casting. So with casting, yeah, I was, it's so specific, this type of show, because you're more aware of the camera as an actor. You're intentionally acknowledging the camera. Your
Right.
performances are somewhat self-aware, because you know that you're being filmed. But then you also, it's important too that the characters in something like this generally should be funny by accident. Like, they don't think that they're funny. They need to be funny because of how they are. And so with casting, I was really looking for the people who kind of understood that and committed fully to the bit that their character is portraying. Like Miriam is pretty deadpan. Miriam Miriam comes from a society that tells her that women don't have a voice. And so when she does speak, it's fairly monotone. It's fairly, to herself. But in that, she has a lot of sass.
Yeah.
She's very sassy while still being monotone.
Annoyed by it. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Like she doesn't think that the way that this is going is great, but it's her brother's deal. So she's kind of along for the ride, and, and does believe in him, but also has, certainly things that she would like to see improved that she's not being heard about because she's a woman. So yeah, anyways, I was kind of with casting looking for, all right, do they get it? And the cast that we got, we're so grateful to have, just because they did get it. Like they came in and they're like, right, it's funniest if I'm just fully committed to it. Like if I don't Like, let the audience be the ones laughing and let me be so committed, yeah. So that was kind of our process with that.
So it's interesting. I mean, you're working on the Chosen. You're working on the Promised Land. I'm curious, like, given your work on the Chosen, how does that give any shape and influence, like, into the creation of the storytelling, the production, even audience engagement?
Totally. Oh my gosh, yeah. I have learned so much from The Chosen. I have so much to thank The Chosen for. Dallas Jenkins is a mentor to me. He's taught me a lot over the past few seasons. That I've worked on the show since season 1, and I've seen it grow. And yeah, I've learned so much from The Chosen. One, if we're talking about writing, one thing that I think is so interesting about The Chosen is how they take a biblical story and they recontextualize it by adding in things that we might relate to. And when you have that, it makes you read that story differently, but in a way that's still true to the story. They're not changing the stories to make them something that they're not, but they add a new layer that makes you think about it in a different way. And I've always thought that was so cool. Whether you're doing that for drama or comedy, I think that's just a really smart approach to material that you can consider familiar, I guess. Like we know a lot of these stories, but then as soon as you kind of insert a new element into it, or just all right, let's see it through these people's eyes, it changes it. And I think that's really smart that The Chosen has done. So I've learned a lot from that. I've learned a lot of just directing from Dallas. I mean, he's a great director, a great person to learn from, a great person to watch. He is also very funny. And, I think he does a great job of kind of working with cast in both the dramatic and the comedic scenes. So that's been huge. And then, yeah, I think one thing that The Chosen has done well that is so important for faith-based projects is that they're very keyed in on making good art. Like at the end of the day, a lot of faith projects, frankly, are focused more on their message than they are on the actual art itself.
Right.
And I think it ends up costing them because, ultimately you want to watch a movie or a TV show because it's good, because it's entertaining, because it has artistic value, and because it's gratifying. Yeah, right, exactly. And then if it has that, and it also is spiritually edifying, right, it's so much more rewarding. But you have to get that other element right. And so I think that's what The Chosen does really well, and what I've learned a lot from that. I mean, it's also a big passion of mine. I just want to make something that is good and funny and interesting and accurate to scripture.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's what I've learned a lot from The Chosen.
You mentioned earlier, like, people's blasphemy radars can go up. I mean, The Chosen itself has faced pushback on that front. Maybe not blasphemy, I don't know, but there's certainly been challenges to The Chosen. I don't think you're gonna be able to escape that. Like, there's just always,
it's gonna happen.
Yeah, anytime. I mean, you have the matter of interpretation, right? Like,
right.
There are details we don't know, and so we got to fill in the gaps, which the rabbis have always been very comfortable doing. But
Totally.
evangelicals, which is circles I tend to move in, are a little sometimes less comfortable doing that. But I was looking at your Instagram before we came on and just reading through the comments. Dude, all the comments are favorable. I mean, everybody loves this.
Right.
I'm curious, just from your perspective, like, what's the feedback been like thus far?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we very pleasantly have had a lot of good feedback, like a lot of strongly positive feedback. My favorite have been, I've even screenshotted something. Let's see if I can find them real quick. But I think one of my favorite comments, which is the ultimate goal from this one comment, someone said, man, this is really interesting. I'm going to have to go back and read some of these stories now. Now it's like, we did it, even if it was just that one person, like, that's what it's all about, but yeah, I mean, people have been really positive about it. They've been saying it's funny. I've had some people say that they've watched it 5 or 6 times. When it came out live, we had people watching it in South Africa, in China. We had people around the world checking in, and someone said, like, hey, it's 4 a.m. where I am, and I set my alarm. Can't wait to watch. You can see kind of the live chat replay if you go on the YouTube and swipe over on the comments, you can see that live chat, and it's just so fun because people are as they were reacting to it live, and I was obviously watching it live too on my phone and seeing these comments come in. It was so fun just to see the jokes that worked, because you never really know unless you show it to people. It's like, well, I think these work, but let's hope. And so it was little things like when Zipporah was introduced, all of a sudden the comments were just like, zippy, everyone's just like, oh my gosh. And then even with the joke about Moses, his kids not being anywhere around, at the towards the end of the episode, people were making comments like, but wait, where are those boys? And someone was like, it's always where are the boys, not how are the boys. People were really responding to a lot of the humor, which is so exciting. And what we've gotten of, I would say, yes, we have had the occasional comment of someone, mostly, honestly, people who haven't watched the whole thing. But we've gotten the occasional comment on some of our other posts of people who are like, I just don't know if I can support this. I haven't watched it, but I'm worried that this is going too far.
Like it's going to make a mockery out of scripture.
Exactly.
Out of this revered, saint of a person, Moses, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We've gotten people who are just like, I don't know if, this is sacred and you shouldn't make it not sacred, and it's been really encouraging to see people's responses to it, where they're saying you should watch it because it, I think my goal has shined through it, which is that I want to make something where people are people, but God is still God, like when we are, the reverence scale, we're still so reverent of scripture and of God, but we're also looking at the people in these stories and saying, yes, but these were people. And if we emphasize what makes them people and their mistakes and the comedy of errors that they go through, then if we can say, hey, God can use those people, how much more could he use us too? It's about relating to them by showing their flaws. And I think sometimes it can be nerve-wracking, but I honestly think for those who have been on the fence about it, if you were to watch it, I hope that you'll see what a lot of people have seen, which is our heart, which is to get it right, but also be truthful to what people are like.
Yeah. I saw a comment on there this morning as I was scrolling through. Someone said my husband isn't interested in reading scripture, isn't interested in Bible study, isn't interested in watching The Chosen, but he loves The Office and Parks and Rec, and I think this will work for him.
Yeah.
So it's just like that. That's incredible. One of my favorite comments I saw was, I hope this goes on 40 years.
Yeah. I love that one. 40 seasons. Let's go. Wouldn't that be great? We'll have to circle back at the end of those 40 seasons and see how we're doing. see how the show has grown. No, I mean the goal is to make 40 episodes. I want to make 40 episodes and a feature film. So you've seen the first one, so 39 more. And then a feature film at some point.
Is there a timeline for this, or have you started filming episode 2?
We hope to be filming the next few episodes this fall. If everything comes together, we should be filming basically 5 more episodes later this fall. And then if all that happens and if it goes well, then we hope to release those next summer. We kind of, we want to almost operate like The Chosen's little brother, right? Where it's like The Chosen. The Chosen in the spring should be releasing season 5. And then hopefully not that long after, you've got the full first season of The Promised Land to carry you over until the next season of The Chosen, and vice versa. If you haven't watched The Chosen, but you've watched The Promised Land and enjoyed it, hey, go check out The Chosen. It's great.
Right. Yeah, that's incredible. So I love that you're going for 40 episodes. That's wonderful. A full film. That'd be great. Yeah, so I want to I was gonna ask how's I gonna ask the unique style is obviously incredible, and one of the things as I was watching, I'm looking at even like Miriam playing like the role of Jim, or how Jim will often do, like look at the camera.
Totally.
whether there'll be some like Easter eggs hidden in there.
Like Office references kind of deal. Like
Office fans
yeah.
can
Yeah.
pick up on. I think that'd be a great draw.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and certainly too, like even if it's not in the show, there's certainly a lot of opportunities for that in our social content too, because I want to also be making kind of side things while we're on set. Like, hey, there's someone asked me recently, like, would we ever recreate that History of the World Part 1 joke where Moses comes down with the tablets and says, hey, I've got the 15, and then one breaks and he says 10 commandments, and we're not going to do that joke on the show obviously, but like that's like a great, like, oh, it'd be cool to just make a quick thing like that for Instagram, like, hey, here's our cast doing it, it's not part of the show, but here's like a little I think there could be some fun crossover elements like that too with with The Office.
Well, man, this is awesome. I am so glad you're doing this. Any other stuff on the horizon that you'd like us to know about?
Let's see. Yeah, I mean the Promised Land is really the big one that we really hope to be filming that this fall. If things all come together on time, and it's looking good, but if everything all comes together on time, we hope to be able to shoot 5 more. And then I mean beyond that, outside of that, I continue to work on The Chosen. I'm going to try to work on it for 2 more seasons, finish out the whole show, even while I'm doing this. I think it's a special show, and I love being a part of it. And there are a couple other projects that I have in development, but no announcements on it yet, just because they're still in development. But as soon as I have more info on those, I'll definitely be sharing. And
I got a question for you. Do you write the entire show scripts ahead of time? Like, do you have all 40 episodes done, or are you doing like a few at a time, and you see what works?
Man, I wish I could write all 40 and have all those as a reference. No, it's definitely doing it in bite-sized, season-sized chunks, basically. I know where the story goes, and I know the things I want to emphasize as the story goes, as we get, to the border of the Promised Land, and the fact that they don't go into the Promised Land and they have to wander for 40 years, and some of the stories that happen during those 40 years. I know the main points I want to touch on, and specifically the kind of character arcs inside of those. I have all that kind of written down. But in terms of the scripts, no, it's just 1 season at a time. I have season 1 all written. So the next 5 episodes, those are written. Those are ready to go. It's just a matter of when we start.
Are you writing yourself? Do you have a team?
At the moment, it's just me. For future seasons, I'm definitely looking forward to growing the writing team for sure. But just for now, for starting out, it's just me writing these first few. Excellent.
Well, man, this is great. For those of you watching, I just want to point you to the Promised Land series.tv. You can get merch. I'm going to throw that on the screen here one more time. You can get merch there. That'll take you to all the socials. And also, you can click that link. As Mitch said, the most important thing at this point is just to go watch it. So you can, watch it there within the website, or go over to YouTube and watch it as well. So, man, Mitch, thanks for carving out time. I know, as you said, you're on the set there of The Chosen, and you're working. Right. So this has been a highlight of my week, man. So thank you for doing this.
Man, and thank you so much.
Hopefully we can help, get the word out even more. We'll push as hard as we can to make sure people are tuning in. So.
Well, thank you so much, Michael. Yeah. I so appreciate it. I'm glad you watched it, man. Thanks for enjoying it. And
yeah, absolutely.
I hope to have more for you very soon.
Yeah, we've got our youth pastor already watching it. A bunch of other people that are in our network.
Oh, perfect. So, I really, the most exciting thing for me would be if it was watched by youth groups, because that's really kind of where I'm hoping it ends up. I mean, I grew up with Christian parents. I grew up going to church. If I was a 16-year-old and this came out, I would have been all over it. And so I hope it's the same for others.
We sat down and watched it the night it came out. Yeah. Our whole family, my wife and our 3 kids. So we were all cracking up, dude. So it's funny.
Thanks
awesome. Thanks for doing this, brother. And keep up the good work. For those of you who are watching, go check out the PromisedLand.tv and the Promised Land series.tv. Check out GlossaHouse.com. the ProveText podcast, which is the audio version of this, and then the GlossaHouse TV channel over on YouTube. But we're going to wrap it up there and say we hope that helps.
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? GlossaHouse can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, GlossaHouse offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glossahouse.com today. GlossaHouse, language resources for the global community.